So now I have four more things I want you to me. Now we're shifting over to the 100 Years' War. Okay? So first of all, write down 100 Years' War. Write that down somewhere. That's the first. There are four things you're going to write down. That's number one. Now, what is the 100 Years' War? Let me define that for you simply. So, you guys remember your nation states and formation worksheets? Okay. If you remember, the English held land in France. Okay. The French tried to repel them. The English tried to hold on to it. The 100 Years' War, that's what it is. It's the French trying to repel the English trying to hold on to it, and then both of them sucking in allies that make this a continental conflict and not just regional. Okay? That's what the 100 years is. It goes on for 116 years. Now, number two thing you need to write down. The cannon. The cannon is a creation that comes out of China, and it has an impact on the 100 Years' War. So if you remember from the history in here, Jericho had walls. Athens had walls. Jerusalem had walls. Rome had walls. Just about every burg, small city in Europe had walls, right? Does that make sense to all of you? You agree that that's what you've been taught? Okay. Is that still the case in the world today? Do you see walls around cities? No. Why? Because of the cannon. Because most of us have checked into the fact that walls are not financially or practically feasible. Why? Dynamite. Explosives. This is why I'm anti-wall. This is not a political statement. Okay? It is not. I can believe that we need immigration reform and believe that the wall is not an answer. Because it's a common sense statement. You spend trillions of dollars building your wall, and I can get rid of it very easily and very quickly. So you just wasted a tremendous amount of time, energy, and money. Does that make sense to all of you? This is why we don't have walls around cities anymore. Now, what impact did that have back then? The cannon now means I can't fight defensively. I can't hunker down behind the walls of my city and force you to scale over them, which is very difficult to do. Because that wall can be blown apart. Cannons, you need to remember, are weapons of destruction more than they are weapons of killing. Okay? You don't target a cannon at people. You target a cannon at the ship or the wall or the right just to get rid of it. So what that means is people have now been drawn out into the battlefield. You follow me so far? Number two, write down, or number three, write down a longbow. What is the longbow? Longbow is a glorified bow and arrow. Absolutely lethal within the length of one football field. Can cause considerable damage within the length of 3 football fields. So the goal of any weapon, right, is to be able to kill without getting killed yourself. To be able to do it from further away. Follow? So what I have done with those 2 inventions is I've drugged people out into the battlefield, and I've made that battlefield more lethal. Follow the logic here? Everybody? We're almost done. Hang with me. Okay. So what are the long-term consequences then? Prior to this time, you had small armies. In feudalism, you had very small armies of professional soldiers, knights. Now, because of the plague, and because warfare has become more deadly, can I really afford to have very small armies? No. So who do I have to start to employ that I didn't employ before? Serfs, peasants, right? That was one of the last things in this paragraph as well. I start to employ ordinary people, armies get bigger. That's going to have long-term ramifications as well. Now, a symbol of that, fourth and last thing you need to write down, is Joan of Arc. Why? Most of you in here have at least heard the name Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc was a French peasant girl who helped lead the French in the Battle of Orleans. Got an arrow in her leg and tried to scale the walls of Orleans. How many of you have seen The Hunger Games? So Katniss Everdeen, the Mockingjay, is patterned after the idea of Joan of Arc. Okay? Certainly Katniss Everdeen was an important figure, but more importantly to the people was that she was the Mockingjay. We can't let the symbol die. The symbol becomes greater than the person. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So what you have with Joan of Arc, she becomes this symbol. Now, what is she a symbol of? Jot this down. Faith. Faith. Because she said she heard voices, she spoke to God, and God had told her to go do these things. And the other thing she's a symbol of is nationalism. That in a time period where no one listened to peasants and no one listened to women, the King of France listens to her. So what does that tell you? That tells you she is a symbol of what we just talked about with the effects of the plague and the cannon and the longbow. That at a time when no one listened to peasant women, they listened to her. That her nationality, being French and her love for her country, was greater than her economic status. And that was not a case that had existed before. We've experienced a little bit of that in our own country. Women treated awful, right, for most of Western history. And then the World War I happens. Women, stay home. Stay home. Your place is in the house. Stay home. Then we send all the men off to Europe. All of a sudden, who's going to build the tanks? Oh, wait, women, we need you. All of a sudden, we need you. And then the women's rights movement happens right after World War II, right after World War I. The same is true with African Americans. Oh, you guys can't fight at night. Oh, you can be a cook on the battleship. That's it. We can't be firing from that. Then we, get into World War II and Vietnam. We're like, the country needs you. All of a sudden, you're needed. 10 years later, civil rights movement. Right? So it's the same thing. We don't need peasants. We don't need women. Wait, 100 years worth. Plague. Lets people die. Joan, we need you. So she becomes a symbol of that. Okay? That's why her name is remembered in history books. By the way, this does not end well for Joan. Does anybody know how Joan dies? Yeah. Yeah, they try her in the Inquisition for being a heretic, right? Because she said she'd spoken to God. And the Catholic Church has her burned at the stake. It's okay, though. 500 years later, the Catholic Church took it back and they made her a saint. Oops, my bad. We messed up. You're now a saint. So she went from being killed for being a witch to being sanctified. You figured that one out. Hindsight's 2020. Okay. All right. Questions on any of this? Okay, so you guys know where your review is. You know about the quiz. You know about cleaning up your work. I love you. I'm out.